UFC 261, we have Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal II. Boxing MMA picks. We are back with another UFC prediction video, giving you fight-by-fight breakdown analysis, letting you know which fights to avoid, which fights are worth the money, which fights you definitely want to stay away from, maybe which underdogs are giving you good value. And hey, if you stick around to the end of the video, you might even get a little bit of parlay action from us. Of course, I go by the name of Harris. Zan is back in the building. Definitely happy to have him back. And again, UFC 261, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal II. There's a lot of title fights on this card, 3 title fights, very stacked main card. As usual, before we get to the main card, we do have to talk about our prelims. Prelims are pretty stacked, at least in terms of number of fights. We have 8 fights on the prelims. So we do have a lot of work to do. Let's start with fight number 1. We have Liang versus Ariane Carnelossi. I'm going to start with reviewing Ariane Carnelossi here. She lost her UFC debut to Angela Hill. That was in September 2019. She hasn't really fought since then. So that's interesting to see her with such a long layoff. I wonder what the reason for that was. When I look at her style, she's kind of a shorter, stockier type of fighter. She's always coming forward in her attack. A pressure fighter. She even did that in the Angela Hill fight. And she had Hill on the back leg. I mean, pretty much for all 3 rounds, she had Angela Hill on the back leg, despite losing, as we see there, due to a cut that came from a nasty elbow from Angela Hill in the clinch. But Ariane looked pretty decent in that fight, win, lose, or draw in that. She was looking pretty decent, and she was looking like she belonged sort of at this level. She does like to clinch. She likes to march forward. She comes with a decent hand heavy stand up. I don't really see much kicks out of her, although she does have a decent low kick. I do see some combinations out of her, of course, that include the leg kicks, and I do see that she has some pop on her strikes. I also see that she does like to engage, sort of no matter what. She is going to keep coming forward again. Go ahead and watch that Angela Hill fight versus Ariane Carnelossi to really get a good idea as to the sort of caliber of fighter that you're getting in the Brazilian. When I look at Liang, it is her UFC debut. She is on a 4-fight win streak. She's definitely going to be the much taller fighter here, as we see a huge discrepancy. 7 inches taller, 6-inch reach advantage, 6.5 inches, I should say. She does have sort of a ground-heavy, grapple-heavy attack. She doesn't waste any time getting her fights to the ground at all. If you watch her fights, you're going to find out in essentially every single one of them, she's been able to get her opponents to the ground right away, right? Again, 4-fight win streak, as I mentioned. And with Liang, she looks like a decent grappler. She looks like she knows what she's doing on the ground. She looks knowledgeable. She uses her long frame to her advantage. A lot of submission wins. 9 of her 15 wins are by submission. 5 of them specifically are by armbar. And 2 of her 4 losses are via armbar. So that definitely tells me that she finds herself in ground exchanges a lot. Ultimately, for this fight, I mean, sort of look no further than Angela Hill. Angela Hill is a good proxy to assess how UFC ready a fighter is. As I mentioned, Ariane Carnelossi, she looked pretty decent in that fight, right? She had a pretty effective in that fight. Sorry, I lost my wording there. But she looked pretty effective in that fight. Obviously, the loss came due to a cut. Liang, on the other hand, I mean, she has fought some competition. She fought Maria Agapova in 2018. She actually lost via TKO in that fight. And in that fight, she brought it to the ground right away, like she does in all of her other fights. And she had a very offensive grappling game. But Maria Agapova, she was able to handle it. She was able to reverse her in key moments. Agapova was able to use her explosiveness and then sort of Agapova style with the ground and pound to seal the victory. This fight in some ways does have a lot of question marks, although Carnelossi has a decent offensive ground game. Personally, I never really saw any footage of her against anyone who's going to test her takedown defense the way that Liang Na is going to do, right? So, I mean, again, some question marks in this, but to me, this is one of those fights where I do think Ariane Carnelossi is supposed to win. I do think she's supposed to win the fight because of her pressure. I do think she's supposed to win the fight because of her activity. And even in the fact that she's been in the UFC before, right? I think, especially in the sort of strawweight division and the lighter divisions, in the women's, experience really does make a factor. We saw that last week be a huge factor. So, I'm going to go with, albeit one fight, I'm going to go with the UFC experience in this one. I'm going with Ariane Carnelossi. I think it's going to be a decent fight. But again, this one does have some question marks in either direction that you go.
Yeah, with this fight, we're getting a grappler versus a striker matchup. So this is one of the typical grappler-striker matchups. It's either going to go one way where Liang can get her to the ground, either the first round, second round, and get enough points, win a decision, or even submit her there. Or we're looking at a fight where Ariane Carnelossi can keep this on the feet, and she is definitely the better striker in this fight. So I'm going to go with Ariane Carnelossi. When I look at Liang, she definitely looks good in those fights, but her last 4 fights, everybody, those have been cans. Like, her last fight was against a fighter 0-0, making her debut. Before that, 2-0. Before that, 2-2. Before that, 4-2. And these are fighters in WLF. So I'm not sure where these guys are in terms of level, but I know that the level isn't that high over there in WLF. A lot of padded records. I'm going to go with Carnelossi here. I think that fight with Angela Hill showed us that she's definitely at a certain level. She's definitely at a UFC level. And there's limited footage on both fighters here. Liang, there's limited footage. So with the footage I got, I'm going to go with Carnelossi here. Even if she gets taken down first round, I think as the fight goes on, she can keep it up. And if you saw the Angela Hill fight, she's still throwing shots in the third round. So her cardio definitely can hold. So I'm going to go with Ariane Carnelossi to win this fight.
I like that pick, and I like the commentary. Let's move on to fight number 2. We have Aori Qileng versus Jeffrey Molina. Now, I'm liking this fight, so I'll break this one down first as well. A lot of wins out of these two fighters, a lot of win streaks, I should say. Jeffrey Molina is on a 7-fight win streak, and Qileng Aori is on a 6-fight win streak. Both of these guys are making their UFC debut, although Jeff Molina did appear in the Dana White Contender Series. When I look at Jeff Molina, I like his game. Overall, I do like his game. He's a pretty patient, methodical striker. I like his use of the calf kicks early in the fight, has good movement, has good timing, pretty sneaky pop as a counterpuncher, a lot of fakes, a lot of diversity to his stand-up, just kind of a good overall fighter. And I've actually seen sort of the ability from him to wrestle and to grapple. So, he can be one of those fighters that really, shows himself in a few years. He's only 23 years old. I imagine the type of fighter he can be maybe when he's 28, 29 years old. So to some degree, you do have to ask yourself if it is too early. But he is going against Qileng Aori. He's 27 in his own right. So 2 fairly young fighters here. And I have a lot of similar things to say about Aori, right? His stand-up does seem patient. His stand-up perhaps is not as diverse. So I would say his hand, he throws a little bit more hands than he does feet. Doesn't really throw a lot of kicks. He does pick his shots well. Sneaky counterpuncher. He definitely has pop in his hands, especially when he's coming forward. And again, I've seen him use takedowns. I've seen him use submissions in fights. So 2 somewhat similar style fighters. Pretty good matchmaking by the UFC. We see that these guys are at a pick'em at -110 apiece. I do like Molina here, though. I like Molina in this fight, and the reason why I like Jeffrey Molina is because I think he is the crisper striker of the 2. I do think he's technically the better striker. I do think he's the more diverse striker as well, especially with those calf kicks, again, albeit 1 inch, but Aori kind of fights taller than he seems. I see those calf kicks working on the taller fighter. I see, Molina having sort of a better game plan. I think his stand-up is better in terms of just overall stand-up. May not have better hands specifically, but I think he has better stand-up in general. And we know that Jeffrey Molina, trains with some UFC guys, right? He trains with some UFC guys. He's training at a Glory MMA. We know some of the names that are there: James Krause, Derek Minner, Grant Dawson, Tim Elliott. You can go through, the rest of the names on there. So we know he's training with those types of UFC talent. I would imagine he has to feel he's ready for this moment. Again, being the young fighter, sort of ready for the stage. Had a good win on Dana White Contender Series. So that usually is a good sort of precursor as to how someone's going to perform in their UFC debut. Again, I like Molina here. I think a good matchup in general. I think it is a pick'em for a reason. It's important to note that Aori Qileng should have the size advantage. He's had quite a few fights at 135 pounds, whereas this one is taking place in the flyweight division at 125. So that might be a factor here, but I don't think it will. I think it'll be a kickboxing match, and I think Jeffrey Molina will get the better of this one.
Okay. I'm actually going with Aori here. I think Aori has the better stand-up here. I think he's going to be the stronger guy, the harder shots. I like him in this spot. I think, again, this is another fighter out of WLF. So, again, we're not sure about the level of competition there. But what I've seen from him, he seems like he knows what he's doing. I see him go for a takedown. So I think that Molina, for him to win this fight, I think he's going to have to utilize some wrestling. I think if he utilizes grappling, he has a good chance there. But I believe that Aori is going to be able to keep this on the feet. And I think he has the better stand-up. I think he's going to have the hardest shots. I think he mixes up the stand-up much better. So, yeah, Aori's my pick here. I'm going to go with Aori to win this fight.
Well, there you go. To pick him for a reason, right? So I'm picking Jeffrey Molina on this one. You're picking Aori Qileng. Let's move on to fight number 3. We have Rong, I should say, versus Kazula Vargas. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really tough fight here. They're bringing in this new guy, Zhu Rong, who has a really good record, 17-3, against Rodrigo Vargas, who had a really good fight against Brock Weaver before that illegal shot that disqualified him. So Molina looks pretty good. He looks like in this fight, he definitely has power, and at any point, he can definitely turn the fight around with one shot. I see Zhu Rong, though. I think he is going to have to be a bit more smarter. He's not the best defensively striking. So he has to be careful, because I think that the power coming back from Vargas can definitely hurt him. But I just believe that Rong is a bit more well-rounded. I seen him like show some grappling. I'm not fond of his striking, but it is serviceable. But I think the well-roundedness of his game should win him this fight. So I'm going to go with Zhu Rong. Rodrigo Vargas is getting up there in age. He's 35 now. Again, close fight, because I can see Zhu Rong looking good, and then one shot, fight's over, right? But I'm going to go Zhu Rong, the more well-rounded guy, in my opinion. I think he should win a decision or even get a finish.
Yeah, and to your point, I think Rong Zhu, what I'll add to this, because I do agree with sort of everything that you're saying, but what I think is going to happen in this fight is I think that Zhu Rong is going to have to handle sort of the early pressure that comes from Vargas, whether it's early pace or whether it's just sort of maybe landing a big shot or taking him to the ground. With Vargas, it's interesting because he will land those takedowns, right? I've seen him use the clinch against the cage. I've seen him sort of end up on top of a lot of his opponents, even though I wouldn't say he necessarily has the best takedowns. We see here in the UFC less than one per fight, 33%. So I'm not going to say he's a takedown specialist, but somehow he finds his way on top in certain fights. So it's going to be interesting to see how Zhu Rong handles that. I see this being one of those 29-28 unanimous decision type of fights for Zhu Rong. And I think the reason for that being is that, he probably loses round 1, new to the UFC. There's a big age gap between these fighters. Zhu Rong is 21 years old. Vargas is 35. So, Vargas might feel sort of a need for respect in this one. So he might come out a little hot early in the fight. But I do think as this fight goes on, Vargas does not have the best cardio tank. Zhu Rong has a little bit more to offer. And Zhu Rong is going to be my pick in this one as well. But what I will say is I do think this one is a bit of a trap, in terms of the odds. Rong is sitting at minus 250. Be careful with that. I'm not necessarily saying Vargas has a clear path to victory here, but I am saying that, again, with the level of competition that Rong has faced, just sort of unproven. And I'm not going minus 250 for anyone that's unproven. So just beware of that. Let's move on to fight number 4 in that case. Now, this one I'm definitely looking forward to sort of cap off the early prelims. We have Danaa Batgerel versus Kevin Natividad. I'll talk about Batgerel first. He's 1-1 in the UFC. Pretty good fluid movement on the feet as a kickboxer. He's a pretty pure kickboxer. I actually think he has a kickboxing background. I like his lateral movement. I like his fake and feints. Good distance control, good leg kicks, good combinations. Very technically sound fighter, and very diverse striking skill set as well, especially with the leg kicks. Very good hands as well, and just the different types of leg kicks. I'm not just referring to a calf kick here or something like that. He does get hit at times, and that's interesting because I would have hoped he would have had maybe better striking defense, but he does get hit at times, especially if you can put the pressure on him. Watch his fight versus Haley Alatang. He showed his chin in that one, but he definitely got hit, a number of times in that one. And somebody who has maybe heavier hands, probably would have put him to sleep. Alatang did end up winning that fight because of a decisive round 3 with the takedowns, but sort of up to that point, it sort of took up until the second half of the third round for Haley Alatang's wrestling to finally make its way through. Up until that point, Danaa Batgerel was doing a good job of defending that. So, it's interesting. 57% takedown defense in the UFC. Take that for what it's worth, I suppose. He is prone to being taken down, but either way, I don't think that part is too important because I don't think this fight goes to the ground at all. When I look at Kevin Natividad, good movement, good in and out, good takedown defense in his own right. Again, I don't think this fight goes to the ground regardless. I don't think Natividad has the best head movement. And what really sort of crucifies his chances to win this fight, in my opinion, is I just don't think he has the work rate. When I look at Batgerel, he can press, he can come forward, he can control center, he can be quick, he can close distance, he can cut you off. He can really show pop when he knows that he has that advantage on the feet. I'm curious to know, does he feel he has that advantage versus Natividad? Because Natividad, his hands, again, they just have to be more active. Although the movement is good, although the feints are there, although the in and outs are there, the hands are just not active. He kind of just stares at you. He kind of looks for that perfect shot, but he doesn't necessarily land it, right? So I do think, again, this one's going to stay on the feet. I do think, again, this one's going to be a pretty good kickboxing match. And in a kickboxing match, I'm going to go with the fighter who is the better kickboxer, and that is Danaa Batgerel, minus 180. I actually think there's some decent odds here.
Yeah, I'm with you on this fight. I think that this fight's going to stay on the feet. And I'm not liking Kevin. I didn't like his last fight. I didn't like what he showed. He was getting outstruck by a wrestler. And he's going to be fighting a real striker that has heavy hands, that has heavy shots. And my problem with one sec here. Yeah, my problem with Batgerel is he gets hit a lot. So that's my problem again. So he kind of likes to trade shots sometimes. But I think in this fight, he's going to be the crisper striker, the striker with the more power. He's going to be more comfortable in the striking exchanges. So I like Danaa Batgerel. I like him in this spot. I think you should get this one.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Let's just show the Tapology results here. 913 early predictions on this one. 76% for Batgerel, 24% for Natividad. So the voters are definitely in agreement with our pick there. Let's go with fight number 5, Tristan Connelly versus Pat Sabatini. Why don't you tell me how you feel about this one?
Yeah, this is a tough one here. I'm not sure what we're gonna get here. Tristan Connelly might be the better striker, might be the better wrestler here. But I actually think Pat Sabatini is going to be the better grappler. And I think a lot of this fight's going to be against the cage. A lot of the fight's going to be with grappling. And I think Pat Sabatini is just slightly ahead. So again, I think this is a close fight. Go either way, but I'm going to go with Pat Sabatini. I just think he's just a bit better in the grappling, and I think that's where the fight's going to be settled. Connelly might have the better wrestling. The wrestling might be even, but when it comes to grappling and transitions and sweeps and reversals, I like Sabatini here. I think he has more tools in the grappling game. So I'm going to go Pat Sabatini to win that fight.
Now, I am going to agree with every comment that you've made, but I'm actually going to go with a different direction on this one. I'm going to go with Tristan Connelly. And the reason I'm going to go with Tristan Connelly, very interesting fighter. And what I mean by that is I think he's a 155er. I mean, this is taking place at featherweight at 145. I think he's kind of a 155er. But if you look at his record, his last win 2 years ago was versus Michael Pereira at 170. And I'm not saying he looked the biggest at 170. We know what Pereira looks like. Pereira looks like a 185er in a 170s body. But, Tristan Connelly, he filled out the division. He filled it out decently in the 170. That match had a lot of clinching. That match had a lot of sort of holding, holding against the cage. Tristan Connelly was able to hold Michael Pereira against the cage. I'm not saying Pereira is the most technically sound, but that is a big body. And he was Pereira. I'm saying Pereira was a huge favorite in that one at minus 450. And Tristan Connelly got the job done. I mean, he looked past the antics. He stayed sharp. He stuck around with that head movement that he has, sort of the interesting style of boxing that he has. And, he was able to sort of rough out a win versus Pereira, landed quite a few big shots on him as well. From that 170 fight, his fights before that, again, were at 155. And that's probably the biggest X factor here, or maybe the biggest question mark here, I would say in some ways, because, again, I do think Connelly has the better stand-up. I do think Connelly has the better wrestling. But, again, like you said, I do think Sabatini has the better grappling. Connelly has a black belt, though, right? So although there definitely may be levels, I would have to assume that Connelly can keep himself protected. I would have to assume that as somebody who's fought at 155 and even 170, I would have to assume that he would have the strength advantage in this one as well. So in a 50-50 fight where Sabatini's best chance of winning is the grappling versus a black belt at a higher weight class, I'm going to have to say that he probably nullifies Sabatini's strengths. Again, 50-50 fight. In my opinion, I think the odds are way off on this one. Maybe 60-40 fight at most in favor of Sabatini. So, I mean, sort of based on that type of logic, I'm actually going to go with the underdog here. I'm going with Tristan Connelly at plus 190. I'm going to see how that one plays out throughout the week, because I might even put a straight up bet on Tristan Connelly for that one. In that case, let's move on to fight number 6, Karl Roberson versus Brendan Allen. Take this one away as well.
Okay, this is another close fight. We got another grappler versus striker. Karl Roberson has really good striking. Brendan Allen is the grappler here, a big middleweight. So he's going to look to get this fight close, get this fight on the ground where he's going to be very dominant. Karl's going to try to keep this on the feet. I'm not sure. I'm not liking how Brandon takes shots. I'm not liking his striking, where I think that if he doesn't get this out of the first round, or if Allen doesn't win in the first round, I think Allen's going to be in trouble here. I think that the striking of I think the striking is going to take over here for Karl Roberson. So I'm gonna bank on this. This is a close fight, even fight. Again, this is 50-50. It depends what type of fight we get. If Allen can get this to the ground, or if Roberson can keep the standing. But I think that Roberson's going to be able to keep this on the feet here. Again, this is a tough fight. As you see, Tapology is 90% on the other side. I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm going to go with Karl Roberson. I'm not going to put any money on this fight because, again, I think this is a 50-50 fight that can go either way. It's a coin flip. But I'm going to go Karl here. I think he's been improving with the grappling. He's in avoiding submissions. I think if he gets out of that first round, I don't think Allen likes getting hit in the face. So I'm going to go Karl Roberson here to get a comeback here. He might be down, and then as the fight goes on, he kind of comes back. So I'm going to go Karl Roberson to win this fight.
Yeah, I can see that as well. I'm looking at two fighters who are improving what their respective weaknesses are. Of course, we know Karl Roberson, the pure kickboxer, improving his ground game. To your point, Brendan Allen likes the sort of a ground game specialist, improving his hands. And I'm gonna cut him a little. I'm gonna cut Brendan Allen a little bit of slack in his last fight versus Sean Strickland. That one was at a catch weight at 195 pounds. I don't remember the exact reason for that. But Brendan Allen just didn't look great with that extra weight on him. I think being true to the 185 weight class is gonna serve him better. And again, to your point, this is a coin flip. This is who can implement their style and or who can stop the other person's style, right? I'm not going to compare Brendan Allen to Marvin Vettori at all, but I am going to use that fight somewhat as a proxy, right? Vettori was able to win that fight because of his advantage on the ground, because of the ability to take it down. Roberson did show that improved game. In fact, he got Vettori down first. He had some scrambling moments. He had some moments where he was, kind of grappling with him, I guess. But Vettori ultimately had the better ground game. And I think Brendan Allen has the better ground game here. And I think regardless of how much Roberson has been improving, I think at some point Brendan Allen is going to get him down. I think he kind of needed that loss versus Sean Strickland. That's probably going to make him a little bit sharper in this one. So I mean, again, coin flip fight, tough fight. I think Tapology is way off on this one. 90% is way too much credit for Brendan Allen. So I hope not too many people are putting this on parlays or anything like that. I'm definitely staying away from this fight from a betting perspective. I'm just going to enjoy this as a pure UFC fan. But I do think that Brendan Allen will be able to implement that takedown, at least in round one, at least in round two or three. And I can see him sort of pulling out 2 rounds in this one, maybe a split decision win. But nonetheless, I do think that Brendan Allen pulls this one out. In that case, let's move on to fight number 7, Dwight Grant versus Stefan Sekulić. Where do I start with this one? Well, both guys are coming off of losses in their last fight. When I look at Dwight Grant, I mean, he lost on the feet versus Daniel Rodriguez. Sekulić lost to, I forgot who it was. Let's actually just look that up here. It was a good opponent as well. Versus Ramazan Emeev. So, 2 legitimate losses. I'm not mad at either guy for losing in those fights. As I mentioned, Dwight Grant lost on the feet versus Daniel Rodriguez. I can't be mad at that at all. He actually dropped Rodriguez in that fight. He had him hurt really bad. Some referees would have stopped that fight. Landed a sneaky second shot on Daniel Rodriguez as well before Rodriguez ended that fight with his hands, right? In the stand-up, I mean, Dwight Grant, of course, I'm talking about here. In the stand-up, throws a lot of haymakers, especially if you start to engage with him. He overextends himself at times, so of course that can leave him open. Very explosive in his movement, somewhat awkward as well, unorthodox to say the least, and throws punches at unique angles that sort of happen to hit their opponent and finds the way to their opponent's chin. With Stefan Sekulić, I mean, he's a southpaw. He has kind of that good John Jones sidekick to the knee. We saw him use that in his last fight. Fights off of the back leg, a little bit more of a counter puncher. I think this fight stays on the feet. I mean, again, these guys are not taking each other down. I wonder if this was intentional by the UFC to have barely any ground specialists going head to head in these fights. But nonetheless, I think that Grant's going to catch him. That's really what I think it is. I think Grant's going to catch him here. It's going to be a looping haymaker of a hook. It's going to catch right on the button. It might put him to sleep. We saw Ramazan Emeev towards the end of that second round. If you watch Stefan Sekulić versus Ramazan Emeev, pay attention to the end of that second round. Emeev hit that same looping hook that I think Dwight Grant is going to land. It was sort of in an exchange. I think it was coming out of a clinch. I could be wrong. But it was close quarters on the way out, looping hook. It caught Stefan Sekulić. It made him a little wobbly. I see Dwight Grant sort of landing the same thing, and that ultimately ends the fight. So I'm going with Dwight Grant on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go Dwight Grant. This is a striker versus grappler match. Stefan has the grappling advantage. I just think that Dwight Grant's it has some power. I think he's just a better striker. And I think this is a good spot for him to get another win. So I'm going to go with Dwight Grant to get this W here.
All right, so let's move on to our final fight of the prelims. We have Alex Cowboy Oliveira versus Randy Rude Boy Brown. How do you feel about this one?
I like Randy, man. I think Randy's going to get this fight. I think that when it comes to standing up, I think Randy's the more dynamic striker at this point. I'll give Oliveira the jiu-jitsu advantage, the grappling advantage. But Randy's no slouch there at all, and he's always improving each fight. So I like Randy here. I think that even if the fight gets to the second, third round, I think Randy's going to have the better cardio. He shows that he can fight in the later rounds. Yeah, I like him. I think he's going to get. I think Oliveira is going to get hurt, and there's a good chance Randy actually finishes him. So I'm going to go Randy Brown to win that fight.
Yeah, with Randy Brown, what's interesting to know with him is that, a good takedown defense percentage, 71%, but I have seen opponents take him to the ground, right? I've seen opponents do that. I am going to trust his takedown defense percentage, though, because, it is 71% through 10 fights, 10 UFC fights, so I'm not going to call it a weakness of his. Opponents have also been able to use the calf kick against him, and what's interesting is that Cowboy technically has both, has the ability to, again, you mentioned, to clinch against the cage. I've seen him land some takedowns from that position. And of course, we know with his, sort of explosive style, some calf kicks are going to be included in there. But I don't really see any obvious path for Oliveira to win this one. I don't think he's a dominant wrestler in any way, shape, or form. I think Randy Brown might even be too strong for him physically. So, again, and then we know, of course, Oliveira doesn't have the best cardio tank in terms of how long is he Cowboy Oliveira for. Otherwise, he's just kind of a fighter in there after that sort of second half of the second round type of thing. Also, what concerns me a little bit about Randy Brown is that whenever he does step up in competition, he hasn't really, not to say he hasn't performed, I'm not going to say that, but they don't end up in wins, right? Bilal Muhammad, Nico Price, Vicente Luque. I'm not saying Oliveira, I'm not even saying any of those fighters compare to one another, but Oliveira still is a name, and that could present some question marks in terms of how does Randy Brown perform here. But ultimately, it's like you said it. Randy Brown, he improves every fight. He's the more dynamic person here. He's the longer striker. That long jab is really effective. Those front kicks are really effective. The combinations are really effective. I think he's going to catch Oliveira. I think he might end up even piecing him up. I don't really see how Oliveira can win this one. I think this is, again, one of those fights that's going to end up 29-28, unanimous decision for Randy Brown. So he's going to be my pick as well. And again, at minus 160, you're potentially looking at some good value there. Speaking of odds, let's actually take this to Vegas to end off our prelim video. What do we want to go with? Let's go with an underdog pick. Which underdog pick do you feel has the best chance to win on the prelim?
All right, let me take a quick look. Who's the underdog in that Allen fight?
I think that's you got Karl Roberson as a plus 110 underdog.
Yeah, I got Karl Roberson in that fight.
Yeah, that's
my pick.
That's not a bad underdog at all. My underdog is going to be, where was that? I just had it here. My underdog is going to be the Canadian, Tristan Connelly. I'm going with him. Plus 187. Juicy odds there. I think that's a 50-50 fight. So, Vegas logic tells you Tristan Connelly is worth a shot there. Two solid underdogs. Two very capable underdogs in that case. So why don't we give them maybe our favorite pick or favorite two picks of the prelim?
All right, I'm going to go with Randy Brown and Dwight Grant.
Let's see what that's looking like. So we got Randy Rude Boy Brown, got Dwight Grant. Even if you were to piece them together, you get a plus 127 on that. Some decent value there. In terms of my favorite pick here, I'm actually going to go in a slightly different direction. I'm only going to provide one pick here, and I'm going to go with Danaa Batgerel. Again, I think Natividad just did not look impressive. He got outstruck by, like you said, somebody who's not a striker. He got outstruck. So what's going to happen versus a kickboxer? Doesn't fare well for him. And again, those hands are just not active enough at all. So I like Danaa Batgerel in that spot. Let's end off our prelim video in that case. As usual, please do all that algorithmic stuff. We would definitely appreciate it. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, participate in the comments. We love all the people that participate in the comments. We love having conversations with you guys. You know, who are your underdog picks of this prelim card? Who are some of your favorite picks of this prelim card? What sort of parlays are you considering? We've had conversations in the comments as well where, you know, people are asking us, hey, you know, I'm thinking about this fight. What are your thoughts on putting this on a ticket? So, you know, let's have all that good banter in the comments. Let's really help everyone make some money on this one. And in that case, let's kind of sign off here. This has been the prelim video for UFC 261 Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal II. This has been Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. Let's get this money.
Let's do it.